Today my guest is Andrew Morgan, the director of Texas USA. Andrew, thank you for being with us. Like so much of your work, Texas USA delves into the lives of ordinary people, um, uh, but unearths a surprising story that seemed to me designed to change hearts and minds. What message did you want to convey to your audience? What did you want them to take away from the film?
Yeah, I was on a trip down in Texas, and I was having dinner with the woman that would become our producer, and she was just telling me this story about the ongoing struggle and fight that progressives were in the midst of in a state where they were underdogs and outsiders in the political system for decades. And there was something about that sense of perseverance and resilience and this deep rooted, hard fought sense of hope that I was just really drawn to. It's easy to be progressive in West Hollywood or in Manhattan. It's not as easy when you're, you know, standing up in city council meetings for abortion rights and you're getting your window shot out that night. When you're like the price of it was so real. And also, this is a group of people who have been on the losing end of the political spectrum and yet have not gone home. I talk to people sometimes where they engage in a political cycle and their candidate doesn't win and they're like, "Well, I'm out." And it's like, "What do you mean you're out? Like
Right,
this
right,
is a long story."
right, right, right.
And it fed that kind of inspired spark and hope in me, being around it, and I wanted to translate that.
How do you think, just from your vantage point and having spent time in that ecosystem, um, how do you think the role of Texas will evolve over the coming years in our political system?
Well, it's such a fascinating state because in one sense it's deeply red and it's become kind of an icon and a bastion for a certain kind of conservative politics. And I can't deny or lessen that. That has not gone down. I think on the other end, it's home to some of the largest cities in the country. And these cities are full of diverse people with diverse ideas and dreams and hopes and desires. And it's creating a tension inside that state that is not unlike the tension inside this country, which is this push and pull between the freedoms and the rights of individuals and this idea of a society and this ability to look after the less fortunate, to make sure that not just a few of us are prospering but that all of us are moving in a better direction. So I think in so many ways the fate of Texas is the fate of America, and the tension and the unfinished story that's playing out there is specific, and yet it's one that we're all in the midst of in this country.
Do you, I mean, when you set out to, this is more sort of a market consciousness
Mhm.
question. When you set out to make the film, you obviously were aware that there were a lot of other films being made at that time about how polarized our political spectrum is. How did you, and that, I mean, maybe it's sort of the same story as being a progressive in Texas. I mean, that for many would be very daunting. And yet you kept your eyes on the prize to make the film you wanted to make, even though you understood you would be one of many, many films tackling a similar topic. How did
Well,
you,
I think
how did you keep
yeah,
it? How did you?
it, in some ways that's the difference between you and I, and that's why you're a lot smarter than I am. Like I think when you fall in love with a story, you just kind of go do it. Like I don't think I think about it from that perspective, probably to the chagrin of some people in my life. But I think for me, two things. I'd always been really interested in campaign films. I love films like The
Did you,
War
did,
Room.
did you see Our Brand as Crisis?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
I
I worked on that a long time ago. It blew me away. I love that movie. I mean,
I love it. I love it too. And one of the things I think I love about films like that is there's oftentimes, I think, a sense that the political process is done in some secret magical way by these other people. And what you find when you get around any kind of politics, especially local politics, is that it's just everyday people who are really invested and interested in making their community a better place. And I think that the kind of North Star for our film was to make these human stories, to humanize the people, because I sort of had the perspective of like, I'm not trying to win you over to one political side. What I'm trying to do is humanize people who, even if they're not on your, traditional side of the aisle, are so they're doing what they're doing out of so much love and passion and belief that even if you disagree with their political goals, you cannot help but learn to trust the motivation. And I think that sense of good faith politics might seem like a fairy tale these days, but there is a way in which, if you're only listening to your side's, communication, you can view these other folks as villains. And so to take cameras and to be with, not just candidates, but organizers, activists, folks working on the ground, I just felt like you couldn't help but love them in some way. And that kind of became the guiding light for the
It's so
film.
interesting you say that just right now because last week I proofread my son's senior thesis, which was about political polarization and really the how democracy is set up to be a virtuous cycle, that the more you engage and deliberate with your fellow citizens, the more you come to see them as reasonable, the more you understand, even if you disagree, but you understand and trust why they believe what they believe. And
Mhm.
that in the current era, because there's people are receiving news and information in such silos and it's being delivered by algorithms. So the more you like MSNBC, the more you'll see things that agree with MSNBC, and the more you like Breitbart News, that's where your feed will go. And so it that trust in the good faith of your counterpartisan is diminishing. And I think what your film does is it's really important because it shows real good faith of real people, which is so easy to forget.
Yeah, and I think it's something that film and documentary film can do uniquely. Like Roger Ebert always talked about them being empathy machines, but that's real. Like I have that experience. I've had that experience with a lot of conservative voices and figures. Like you spend time with people and you kind of put your guard down in a way that you can't do in a 90-second video. You can't
Right.
do it in a commercial. You can't do it like that's a really exciting space to me, and God knows we need, more
Right.
of that in all kinds of ways.
And if you can you can both disagree and accept that the other person is acting in good faith. And you need to spend time with that person to understand that you may see things wildly differently, but that person really does believe it's not a ruse. And I think we're losing that in this.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. And I think that's what's so powerful when I spend time with people, in a political charged environment like this is like, you're with candidates or you're with folks and there's people, screaming across the street and there's bullhorns, and there's all this stuff. And then you're talking to people in a restaurant or you're in someone's home and you're asking, what do you want for your kid's future? What do you want for the future of this country? And what always strikes me is it's remarkably similar what we
Right.
want. And I'm not trying to pave over the differences because there's a different strategy of how we get there. But if you separate it from good and evil and right and wrong. Like we've done a real disservice versus we share so much. Like we want so much of the same stuff for our kids. We want good jobs, good education. We want safe communities. And so if we disagree about how we get there, that's a whole different ball game
Right.
than like you're not like me.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right. You don't respect human life. You don't. Right. I mean,
And we've all been guilty of that on every side. And I don't want to like put that on one side too. We've
yeah,
all done that. Every
exactly.
time I
Oh
hear
no,
that rhetoric,
exactly.
I'm like,
Right.
oh,
Right. Exactly. What just in closing, do I mean, the film has been on a lot of different platforms where people have watched it. Have you gotten d- letters that surprised you from viewers, either pro or con, supportive or critical?
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to see, and we've done a bunch of screenings across the state of Texas, and we've used it in voter registration events and all kinds of stuff. Um, it's been incredible, and to the point of our conversation here, I think the most incredible have been from people who are like, I don't agree politically with anything in this film, and yet I really enjoyed being able to like learn and take in, why they're motivated to do, what they're doing. You know, that's a drop in the ocean. But I think every time you read a note like that, you think, wow, like it there's a real tendency, and I have felt it ever since 2016. There is a push as a filmmaker to make things more divisive. There is a current that is moving that way, and it's
Yeah.
much easier to get distribution. It's much easier to get
Yes.
uh, following. And I think when I read a note like that, it just kind of quietly reconfirms my hope and fervent belief that there is a need and an opportunity and a lane to do something different than that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for making the film, and it continues to be available, and it's more timely than ever. So, thank you, Andrew Morgan, and have a good day.
Thanks, Andrew.